morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I'm your host, Photo Joseph, and I'll be taking you on a tour of what's new in these two apps. Today's agenda, we are going through specifically the new features. This is what we're focusing on, is the new stuff. And when we come to FilmPack, we're going to do a little bit more general exploring. We're obviously going to focus on what's new, but we're going to be a bit more general just because FilmPack has, it's been a while since it's been upgraded. For a lot of people, I think you may have not seen it yet. And so we're going to spend some time playing around in there. But essentially, here's what we're going to be running through. Starting with PhotoLab, the new U point feature, U line or control line, is just fantastic. So we've seen control points or U points. Now we have control lines. Super, super great improvement. And what's really cool, and even if you saw my launch demo that I did, I didn't have time to show this in there. You can combine control lines and control points, which is really awesome. So we're going to be getting into that. We're going to talk about the updates to metadata. We're going to specifically show sharing metadata between applications. We're going to be working with Lightroom Classic for this, and we'll be bouncing back and forth between Lightroom Classic and PhotoLab. We'll also be looking at keywords in PhotoLab, so some cool things in there to look at. There are, like you see on the slide here, it's a significant improvement in processing time for DeepPRIME to reduce noise. This is kind of a hard thing to demo, but I actually do have, I just remembered I forgot to open it, but I do have a chart with some time comparisons that I did on my own systems, both on Intel and on M1. So in fact, what I'm going to do is just open that right now before I forget. Let me freeze my screen for a moment here and open that up. And that will just give you some basic ideas of what kind of numbers we're talking about here. For my own personal system, obviously with your system might be different, but it's good to kind of see what that is. So sorry if I had that open on Tuesday before the show, but not today. So where did I put that? We find that here, sort by modified date, and it's not there. Probably because I'm sorting backwards by modified date. There it is. There's the comparison chart. Okay, so I've got that up and running, so I'll bring that up when the time comes. Okay, so I think, let's see here, we'll go back to the slides. Oh, and then of course the beta support for the Fujifilm. Very, very exciting. One of the big things that's exciting, of course, for a lot of people, and is going to allow people to use PhotoLab for the first time, the Fuji shooters out there. So I think you'll be excited about that. And just in case I forget to mention it when we get there, I want to point out what it means to be in beta. It is, the whole app is obviously not in beta. The whole app has shipped. The Fuji support specifically is being called beta simply because DxO feels like they can do even better. And I think you'll find when you start playing with it, if you are a Fuji shooter, that it is already tremendous. I've seen some comments on my own YouTube videos, people talking about how much they're loving it. But DxO feels they can do better. So they want a couple of things. They want a little more time to really make it best. And they also want your feedback as Fuji users to hear how you're doing with it. And their feedback, your feedback can get fed back to them. And if there's any improvements that need to be made, hopefully they will be able to do that. And then it will at some point be no longer beta. But that's the idea behind the beta. Still fully works, but there you go. And then we're going to jump into FilmPack. We're going to talk about the time machine feature, which is just super fun, cool way to explore different looks for your images, talk about some of the new presets, and then we'll dive into the deeper adjustments on there, the customization for it, specifically with split toning and some other things in the HSL engine, and we'll take a look at what those can do. So with all that said, let's get this thing going. There is a lot to cover in a short amount of time, so let's dive in. I'm going to start with this same photo as you might have seen in my earlier demo. If you saw the demo that I released on my YouTube channel, I'm going to use the same photo, but we're going to take it farther than I had a chance to in that demo. So that's what we're going to focus on. Also, when I'm doing demos, I'm going to turn off my camera, give you guys a little bit more room to spread the screen out. If you have questions throughout, drop them into the questions area. And Lori is on the line with us. She's going to extract those questions and drop them over to me. And every once in a while, I'll pop out of the demo, turn my camera back on, and try to address your question. So with that said, let's turn off the camera and jump on in to this photo here. So this photo, in case you're wondering, this is not a drone. This was actually shot from a helicopter back before we had drones and we had to actually get in helicopters to get photos like this. And it is Hawaii. It's getting into the time of year when we all lust for things like Hawaii. And this is, I mean, look, it's perfect, right? The perfect color water, the perfect color sand, the perfect color green. But hey, it's the digital world. Let's make it even better or just different. So the way we're going to do that is with control line. So let's start the old way, control point. Let's say I want to change the color of the water. If I wanted to do that with control points, it would take multiple points. So let's start with one here kind of drag that out. And I've got my masks enabled here so we can see what's being masked. And I would position that on just the right part of the water. Okay, so that's good. That's a good start. And then we'd add another mask up here, and then maybe add another mask, maybe make that one a little bit smaller. And we would have to do this over and over again to get the water in there. And at this point, you can see we're starting to get some of the green. So I might want to go in there with negative control points and start blocking out areas of the green, and so on and so on. And we build up a mask that is going to apply to all of the water in there. And that's the way we've always had to do it. But there is now a better way. And the better way is using this new control line. So control line, like a control point, it is building a mask in real time based off of the chrominance and the luminance. That's the color values and the brightness values of the area where you start the point. The point, if you're doing a control point, it is literally where you drop that point. But a control line, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Let me show you what I mean. So again, I want to change the color of the water. So I click and drag just like a linear gradient. That's how it basically starts, like a linear gradient. So I can make the gradient fall off as gradual or as short as I want it to be. So let's make it nice and gradual here, like so. Anything on this side would be affected 100% if this was a normal linear gradient. Let's turn that camera back off. Anything on this side would be 0% if it was a normal linear gradient. Now those rules do still apply. However, on the 100% side, and then of course this is the fade off from 100 to 0. On the 100% side, all that's going to be affected is what is part of the mask, what is part of the control mask, or the viewpoint mask. Now, because the control line starts here, that doesn't necessarily make sense like it does with the control point to sample the color from there. So there's a new tool, a little eyedropper, that we can drag around and position wherever we want to sample color from. So if I want to sample from this part of the ocean or this part of the ocean or up here, I can do that. I can put it anywhere I want. In fact, I could probably even sample it over here. That wouldn't make sense, but you could. So I would position that eyedropper to find the right position to select the majority of what I want in here. And we will still refine this, but I drop it on this color of the water. Let's turn off the mask real quick. So you can see the water here is quite a different color. It's quite a bit darker blue. It's a little bit kind of aqua up here. A lot of different variation in there. We want to get all the water as much as we can. So we're looking for a place to sample that from that is going to work. Like here, it gets into too much of the sand. We just got to find the right spot. So there's a good starting point right there. So from there, this looks pretty good, but we can make it even more precise. And that is using, let's go into the local adjustments here. That is using the new Chroma and Luma sliders. So if you are aficionado of the Nik collection, then you know that this is something that was introduced recently in the Nik collection. We now have this in PhotoLab, the ability to refine your mask. And here's how it works. So remember, I said your mask is built off of the chrominance and the luminance, the color and the brightness of wherever we sampled from. So in this case, it's this kind of bluish. Let's go take a look at it. It's like a dark blue in there. So logically, if I take the chrominance and I drag it to the right, that's going to restrict it. It's going to make it a more narrow range of color. Then we're only going to get colors as part of the mask that are closer to this. So closer to this dark blue color. If I expand it to the left, then it's going to get broader. So we'll expand it to include more of the bluish water. And I would imagine if we went too far, we'd start to get into things like the green and so on. The luminance, same idea. If I drag it to the right, it is going to constrict that. So we're going to end up with areas that are only very similar to this dark area. And since I started with the dark area, we know already that's not going to work. Going the opposite direction is going to give me a broader range. So it'll get more into these really light foamy areas where we have a lot less darkness, because we're starting with darkness, less darkness to sample from. So let's go ahead and turn the mask back on. That's always a good way to do this. And then I'll take the chroma, and first I'll drag it to the right to really constrict it. And you see here how we are now really just getting the darkest parts of the water in the mask on there. If I go the other direction, then there's kind of all the water, and as we start to expand it out, eventually it's just going to get basically everything. So we've got that range in there. And so we'd go in here and go, okay, well, it's probably somewhere around, maybe there-ish or so. Okay, so it's a starting point. But we can see here, we still don't have quite all of this selected. So we go to the Luma, and with the Luma, let's take that way up. And again, very restricted. So remember, we sampled it from a very dark area. So we're only getting the darkest parts of the water selected here. But if I take that Luma slider and I drag it the other way, we get more and more of the brightness values, and all the way down until we're getting basically everything, doesn't matter how bright or dark it is. And even with the Luma, let's take the Luma way down. I'll take the chroma up a little bit. You can see how between these two, you really can find the happy place to find just the right amount of adjustments that you want. So let's find this. I'm going to back the Luma off a little bit, take the chroma, maybe back that off a little bit as well. Maybe refine the Luma a little bit. There we go. We're getting there. So we can really see this is more selected than this. Yes, that is true. That is true of all the U-point masks. There are areas that are more and less selected, but that is what ends up making it very believable. And you can even see the water kind of encroaching up onto the coastline here is all looking very good. Okay, so we're off to a really good start. But take a look up here. We'll see that the sky is largely selected up here. If I turn off the mask, we see that's the sky up there. So we don't want the sky up here to be selected. I want to change the color of the water, but not of the sky on there. So I'm going to add a negative control line. So just like control points, you have negative control lines. So I've got my control line selected. I'm going to go ahead and make it negative. And now drag, same thing, just drag and drop a gradient across that. Maybe I'll start that a little bit lower there and position that into place. Let me actually turn the masks on so we can see what's happening. Then there is a separate eyedropper. I want to go ahead and eyedrop from sample from the sky on there and find that happy place to kind of balance those out. And that's looking pretty good. So we've got the water in the sky. I might actually, because, let's see here, let's take a look at the image. Because, I'm gonna pull that down a little, the water gets quite dark out there and it's really faded out. Maybe what I really want to focus on is more of this closer to the beach area. I don't want to end up changing the color too much out here. So having this longer fade off is probably going to work out quite well. We take a look at the mask and we might even end up pulling that down a little bit. We'll see how it goes. So looking pretty good there. All right, so there's the basic part of that. Before I do any more adjustments to the control points, let's actually play with the color and see what's happened. So the demo that I'd done before was to say, maybe I want to change the color of the water. And there's a lot of different tools here to do that with, right? You've got your standard control point and now control line controls. You have all your exposure type controls, your color type controls, saturation, white balance, hue, and so on, and then your detail controls. What I'm going to do is work with color temperature, which works really well for water. Just a neat little tip in there. So if I want to make this a little bit bluer, I'll just cool that down a little bit and the water takes on a more blue color on there. And if I go the other way, we're going to end up making it more green. What kind of water do you want on your Hawaiian vacation? So you can just really dial that in however you like. And look in here, look at the detail of the shallower area of the water in here over the sand. The sand is not changing color, but look at how the water there just beautifully shifts with that. It's really, really clean and effective, very believable. Obviously you go too far and nothing looks right, but as with anything here, you do it within realism, within kind of a realistic range, and it's extremely believable. So that's looking pretty good in there. So now let's say that I want to affect, let's go back to the mask view. I want to affect this area more. I just want to get more of an effect in here. So instead of adding another control line, which wouldn't really make sense in there, let's go back to the positives, and I'm going to add a control point right into this spot in here. And now I'm combining control lines and control points, and I can really position that to get more of an area. So if there's a spot that just got missed, or let's go the other direction. Let me just delete that. Let's say that this part of the sand right here, even though it's very good, but let's say I want to really protect it a bit more. So I'll go negative, and we'll drop a control point on there. Let's drop that down a little bit, and now I've really protected that area. So you can do this massive, very precise level of control, combining the control points and the control lines, negative control points and positive control points, negative control lines and positive control lines, and really dial in your area exactly how you want it. So this is just really fantastic. The ability to combine them like that is absolutely brilliant, and one of the things that makes this so incredibly powerful. Combine that with your mask selectivity over here, and away you go. So that's what I wanted to show you with the control lines. Let's see here if there's any questions that I want to address before we move on. I see Peter has asked, how do you make negative control lines? So we just did that, but just to make sure you didn't miss it, if we go down here at the bottom, you'll see there's a positive and a negative adjustment here. So in positive mode, whatever I have, well, that's a control point. I would go to control lines. That is a positive control line. If I switch it to negative, now I'm making a negative control line. So you can see here, let's just do a quick reset and control lines. And if I do that, let's get the mask is on. I could do a line like that and like that and like that and like that, and I end up with this whole, 4 angled coming at each other. But then I want to protect something at the top, so I can grab a control line and drag that across to protect that area up at the top there, and obviously set your sampling area to wherever you need it. But you can combine those and get a really complex mask by combining those 4 elements: control lines, positive control lines, negative control points, positive control points, negative. So that's how that works. Nelsona asked, is it possible to disable the black banner that comes with some tools? Example, local adjustment, the black banner. Disable the black banner that comes with some tools. I'm not quite. Oh, you're talking about this thing up here. That is probably what you're talking about. That's a really good question. If we hit shift question mark, it brings up all the controls, all the hidden keyboard shortcuts. I don't think there is actually. Shift line control, no. Assuming that's what you're talking about, I don't believe that there is. That is an interesting point. There's really no need for that, is there? Huh. It's funny. It's something I just have never really thought about, but I think you're right. That should be hideable. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. I don't think it is, but hey, DxO wants your feedback. Go to their website, add feedback in there, and tell them, yo, get rid of that thing. And maybe there isn't. I'm daft. Lori, if you know a way to do it, please let me know in my little chat thing. But I don't know. Okay. No other questions coming up now. If there is an answer for that, Lori will get it for me, and I'll be able to pop that in for you. Tell you that. Okay. Let's talk about metadata next. Metadata is the next space we're going to go into. So I'm going to hide my camera again, and I am going to use the same set of photos that I did for the other demo that you may have already seen, but we're going to do a little bit more with it. So here's what I've got. Let me rearrange my window here. Okay, remember, let me turn the camera back on for a moment. Remember that with PhotoLab, like with Lightroom Classic, there's no centralized database where your photos are stored. There's database of what's happening. In PhotoLab, it's stored in the little DOP files that are stored next to the file. Lightroom does have a database for the library itself, but the actual photos live somewhere else, wherever you want, somewhere in your computer. There could be an external hard drive, locally, whatever. And so this gives us the ability to look at the same folder of photos with multiple applications, which is really awesome. And what we can now do is share metadata. The PhotoLab will read and write to the XMP file, which is that common used by a ton of different applications. Sidecar file, you might have heard it referred to as a sidecar file. That sidecar file, that XMP metadata file, contains a ton of information about the photo. Now there's EXIF metadata that is a permanent part of the photo. That's things like the exposure, your focal length, your lens information, and so on. That is in the file itself. That is embedded in that raw file. However, other metadata, the kind of metadata that you would edit, like IPTC data and keywords, that is stored in a separate file, now in what's called the XMP file or the sidecar file. So by having that in a separate file, that means that if the applications are all compatible, then different applications can read the same metadata, which is really awesome. Now, if we go into PhotoLab, let's go ahead and turn my camera off. If we go into PhotoLab, there is a new preference under the preferences here, under advanced, that allows you to always synchronize metadata. So enabling this option will keep metadata synchronized between DxO's PhotoLab database and image files or their XMP sidecars. Please note, XMP sidecars will be automatically generated for raw files if not already present. So just telling you that file is going to be there. If you enable this, then everything happens automatically. If you don't enable this, then nothing happens automatically, but you can do it manually by going to the file menu and choosing metadata, read and write. So regardless of whether you have that enabled or not, the same thing can happen. The metadata can get shared. You can just choose to force it to happen manually, read the metadata, write the metadata, or you can have it automatically. And obviously doing it automatic is a lot more fun because that makes for a much better demo. So I'm going to leave it on automatic. All right, so if we look at this first photo here, you'll see that there is a whole bunch of blank IPTC data. So we're here in the metadata field. You see how we got our IPTC, all blank. We look over here at Lightroom Classic. We're also looking at IPTC, and again, all blank, except for the date created. I have no idea why that's under IPTC, because that really isn't. But anyway, so there we've got all this blank data. So let's start adding data on one side. I'll start over here in Lightroom, and I'm going to add a creator as Photo Joseph, and then I'll add a job title. Oops, hide that. Don't really want that up. And I'll add a job title as, we'll just call me Chief Photographer. There we go. So I've got these 2 bits of metadata that I've added. Obviously, I could add a bunch more. We'll start with that. As soon as I make a change up here, you notice that Lightroom has this little metadata status, and it updates to has been changed. This tells me that something has changed in Lightroom that has not yet been reflected in the XMP file. Okay, so I have a couple of different ways that I can force this metadata into the XMP file. I can go to the metadata menu and choose Save Metadata to File. I can hit the keyboard shortcut Command S, which is the quickest way. Or you can click on this little button right here, and that brings up a thing that says there are metadata changes. Do you want to change? And you can enable Don't Show Again. I'm not going to do that now, but that way, whenever I click that button, it just happens. But there we go. It's up to date. Now that that is up to date, take a look over here. Look at the PhotoLab. Notice that the same metadata fields have been added in here. So now this tells me that I can just save the metadata from here and it updates on the right in PhotoLab. So if I want to manage my metadata in Lightroom, or I've already managed the metadata in Lightroom, I can write that in. So I'll just go, I'll just put my address, there we go, and I'll put in my city, and I'll put in my state, and I'll put in my code, and my country, blah, 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 blah. You enter all this stuff in, and country, there we go. No, brother, I mean, seriously, who's running this demo? And at some point, I go, okay, I want to save everything over. This time I'm going to do it with a keyboard shortcut. I'm just going to hit Command S, and when I do, I want you to look over here at the metadata, and you'll see how quickly it shows up here. So what this tells you when we see the timing is we're seeing a combination of how long it takes Lightroom to write that metadata and then how long it takes PhotoLab to automatically read that metadata, because remember, it's set to automatic. So I'll go 3, 2, 1, Command S, and boom, look at that, it's already here. So it shows up very, very quickly like that. And we can do it the other direction. So I'll go in here and I'll put in my phone number and my email and my email. My website I'll actually put in. I have a shortcut for this, PJC. Nope, that's not it. Oh well, photojoseph.com/DxO. Haha, there you go. You want to go there. And I can add all that metadata in there. Headline, we're going to do the official demo. Billy the Chimp, that's who this guy is. So I get all that metadata in there, right? And now I look over at Lightroom, and over here, it takes a moment, but Lightroom goes, ooh, look, it changed on the disk. It acts like a little chimp, and it goes, ooh, it changed on the disk. I didn't have to click it. It just recognized that it changed on the disk. So now to get it to read that change, because see, we're not seeing the changes in here yet. To get it to read it, I can just click that little button, or I can go to the metadata and choose Read Metadata from File. I do that, and boom, there she all is. So we get that common metadata sharing back and forth, which is just super, super awesome. So that's the first big thing of the metadata that I wanted to show you. That is awesome that we can do this. We now have the ability to save the metadata across the multiple applications. For those of you who are using both apps side by side, this is a huge improvement. All right, now let's talk about keywords. So let's go back to this collection here, and I'm going to start adding keywords. Now, let me turn my, actually, I'm going to turn the camera on. So we're going to add some keywords to this photo. We're going to start with a chimpanzee, because that's what he is. Right? This Billy here is a chimpanzee, so I add chimpanzee. And let's say that I'm doing like a kind of scientific database here, and I want to have part of the taxonomy of a chimp. A chimp is a primate, and a primate is a mammal. So I add all those keywords in there. So I got chimp, primate, and mammal in there. The thing is that these keywords right now are just flat. We have this ability now to do what's called hierarchical keywords, or a keyword tree. You might see it referred to that way as well. And that means that I can have keywords inside of keywords. So in this case, we're going to take a primate and move it inside of mammal. Open this up, and a primate is a mammal, right? And a chimpanzee is a primate. So I open these up, we have this cascading hierarchy of keywords in there. So if I ever click on chimpanzee, let's turn all of these off. If I click on chimpanzee, it's going to automatically add primate and mammal to that. This also allows me to search for all primates. And then it'll show me everything that's inside of that list. Search for all mammals. It'll show me all the primates and the chimps and whatever else I might have added in there. If I go to a photo like this one, which is a primate and therefore is a mammal, but is not a chimpanzee, I can add the keywords, just the keywords that I need in here. So oops, go back here. So I'll go in there and I'll say, this is a primate. So I click on primate, it adds primate. It also adds mammal, but of course it doesn't add chimpanzee because I didn't click on that top of the tree. I clicked in the middle of the tree. So now let's say I want to add a keyword for this guy. And for the sake of the demo, we're going to pretend that I don't know what he is. So I'm going to call him Bob the monkey animal. And I hit that. And there's Bob the monkey animal has added in there. Now I go, okay, I know that he's a primate, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. But he's not a chimpanzee. I don't know what he is. So I called him Bob the monkey animal. At some point, I'm going to figure that out. I'll go in here and I'll edit this and I'll change it. And this guy is a macaque. So we're going to just put in macaque in there. And now I've edited that keyword. So we have this ability to reorganize, put the keywords into a hierarchy, obviously edit them. We can look at here, you can remove the keyword, add a new keyword, put a new keyword inside of the macaque. delete the keyword entirely from the database, or you can do that by clicking on the little minus thing up there. So you have this really great ability to do all that in there. So super fun. So now let's take this metadata to the next level. I've got metadata, a bunch of IPTC data applied on here. And I look at this photo and it's empty. And I look at this photo and it's empty. All the rest of these photos have none of that metadata. But I've just applied this here. I don't have to do it again for all of these. So now we have this whole copy and paste metadata option. So I go to copy metadata. That's going to copy everything. And there's a nice keyboard shortcut, Command Control C or Control Alt C, maybe on Windows. No, that wouldn't make sense. Anyway, whatever. It's something on Windows. Sorry, don't know what it is, but it's Command Control C on Mac. So I select that, and then I'll go ahead and select all of these photos. Right click, and now there's paste metadata, but there's options. I can paste everything. So if I knew I wanted everything the same, Command Control C and then selecting Command Control V, super fast to get all of that out. If I just wanted the keywords, I could paste just those. If this photo had GPS coordinates, I could just paste that, which that in itself is really cool. So you could, let's say, this is kind of a neat idea. I'm not set up to actually do this, but kind of a neat idea. You could have a iPhone photo or your Android smartphone photo that you took at this zoo. So these were taken at a zoo. Obviously, this wasn't out in the wild. You can take a photo at the zoo, right? You got one with your iPhone. And then you have your photos that you took off your regular camera that doesn't have a GPS receiver on it. So now you go to your iPhone photo and you copy the metadata, and then you go to all the rest of your zoo photos and you can paste the GPS coordinates from that iPhone photo to all the other photos in here. So now they all have that GPS coordinate data on there. Kind of a cool thing to be able to do. Copy and pasting GPS metadata is a really nice little feature to have in there. So anyway, let's go back into this. So I've still got those 4 selected. I go paste metadata. So I can paste all keywords, GPS, or just the author and copyright, or I can choose the paste selected metadata. And just like the copy and paste of adjustments, I can choose exactly what I want to paste in here. Now, I don't want to paste the ratings because you can see I've already rated each of these individually. Don't want to paste the ratings, so let's turn that off. IPTC data. Chances are I want all of this. I want my creator, I want my title, my address, city, state, postal code, country, phone, email, website. Yep, that's all the same, so we're going to leave all of that turned on. The headline. Yep, the headline is good. Same headline everywhere. Description, I didn't put one in, but let's say I had put a description in and I didn't want that one copied over, so I would turn that off. Here, keywords, I definitely don't want the same keywords because, right, remember this one's got the whole chimpanzee tree. This not a chimp, last I checked, ain't no chimp. So, and that was not even a mammal. So I definitely don't want those keywords in there. So I'm going to turn off keywords. Now when I hit paste and I go to start looking at these pictures, we'll see all that appropriate metadata there, but the keywords are not applied. So we go to this one, I didn't overwrite my keywords, there's the old keywords and all the new IPTC data, and then these 2 photos have all that same IPTC data as well. So super, super handy to be able to do that, really nice control over copy and pasting of that metadata. All right, into the questions. Jill asked, what does the opacity slider do? So we're talking back with the control lines. The opacity slider, I can actually show you this, would adjust the overall effect. So let me go back to that photo. Here we go. Oop, wrong one. There it is. Is that right? Yep. Open the photo. So let's go in here and do a quick local adjustment. Let's hide that and do a control point and do a big old control point here. So I do this and hide the mask and I take a color temperature. Okay, so let's say that I've dialed this whole thing in, but I just want and a combination, right? This makes more sense if I do a combination. Or I also adjusted the exposure. Let's do it the other way. And I don't know, I adjusted the highlights and I did a bunch of different things at once. And then I go, oh, I just want everything to kind of scale back a little bit. So then I take the opacity of that whole effect and pull that back. That's what the opacity slider does in there. Okay. Edward asks, can you adjust the chroma and luma for each control point or line? You can as a separate mask, but the chroma and luma slider is for the group of masks. So if let's reset this, add a control point here, and we'll see that's listed as a control point and I have control over that. So there's my adjustments. I have control point adjustments there. If I add another control point here, and then let's add a negative one over here, these are all one control point collection. This is my new collection. Remember, you can rename those. That came on quite a while ago that we got that ability. These are now controlling for all of those together. They are not individually separated ones. But if I go in and I create a new mask, and then I go in here and create a whole, go to positive here, and create a whole new mask. Now that is a new control point that has its own individual separate adjustments. So that's how that works. Okay. Blair and Wolfgang, Shift E gets rid of the graph bars and Shift E again brings them back on a Mac. In Windows, oh, the Shift E, that is, okay, he's talking about this, we call it the equalizer, these sliders here. Shift E toggles that on and off, but it doesn't hide this bar up there, which is what I assume the person who was asking about, Nelsona was asking about. I believe that's what they were talking about. The actual controls, though, that is Shift E to hide that. So if that's what you were looking for, then that's how that works. Gary, how can the keywords be shared between apps? Are they not local to DxO only? So no, actually, okay, let's take a look at that. Let's go into back to the IPTC data. And okay, so I've added keywords to these two photos here. Let's go back to Lightroom and open the keyword list, and let's update the metadata. Import settings from disk. And look at that, there's our keywords in there as well. So it does share the keywords back and forth too. There's a thing that you do have to be kind of cautious, cautious is the wrong word, but be aware of, let's say. If you're doing keyword adjustment back and forth between the apps and you are altering keywords, you're adding them, deleting them, renaming them, and so on, depending on when the database is synced, you may end up with additional keywords in Lightroom. So let's say that in PhotoLab, I had entered that, what did I call him? Bob the monkey, whatever it was, where I put then changed to macaque. Lightroom could potentially have grabbed that Bob the whatever keyword and added that to its database. And so when I came back here to look, I would see both chimpanzee and Bob the macaque. In fact, let's see if we look at Bob the macaque. Let's see, is it there? Oh, it needs to be updated. Where are we? Metadata, update, change on disk, update, import settings from disk. And so we just have the right ones. Macaque, you see chimpanzee is there, but not applied. However, it is possible that the old one would have showed up in Lightroom. That can happen as they're sharing data back and forth. So just something to be aware of. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. Todd, does PhotoLab 5 read the hierarchical keywords already in Lightroom? We just saw that. Oh, already in Lightroom. Will Lightroom recognize the hierarchy? We answered that. And then Evan, do the keywords auto sync with Apple Photos and On One RAW? That I don't know. I have not actually played with how to try that, so I can't answer that. And I'd have to set up a whole separate thing to do. I'm going to say no to Apple Photos because Apple Photos stores its photos in a dedicated database internally. If you choose to store your Apple Photos externally, I don't think Photos makes a sidecar file. It would read them on import, but I don't think it's going to refresh that metadata. Apple Photos is very limited in how it works in that way. On One RAW, I don't know. I'm not an On One RAW user, so I just don't know how that works. Sorry. Okay. I feel like I was going to come back and read. Does it read the hierarchical keywords already in Lightroom? That's a really good question. Let's find out. I don't know. So let's go to a new one here, and we're going to go, let's add, so it's not a primate. We're going to go to mammal and add a keyword underneath this. Let's see, how do I do that? Add keyword, we're just going to call this bears. I know it's not the right thing, but that's fine. And is that going to add it as a sub? It's not. Going to drag that in there. There we go. Okay, so there I've added it as a sub. So mammal is now a sub, bears is now a sub under mammal, and let's apply it, right? So we've got both of those applied, bears and mammal. All right, now let's save the metadata. Conflict detected, we're going to overwrite. So we're forcing the metadata back over. And now let's go look at it in here. Yep, there it is. Look at that. Ooh, bears have shown up under mammal. Sweet. I love it when things work the way you hope they do. Awesome. So there you go. Okay, where are we on time? That's it for the questions. Okay, great. Now let's do very quickly. We're going to talk about Fuji support. Just because there's not a whole lot to show. It works, and that's basically what you need to see. But let me just do this. I'm going to go into the Fuji photos. So these are from a photographer named Gregory Rohart. I'm not a Fuji photographer, so I don't have any of my own photos to show you here. And here's the really cool things we want to point out in here. First of all, it works. That's number one. You can see here, this is shot on a Fuji X-T3 with the XF 200mm lens. And let me make this a little bit bigger here. Can I? I guess that's as big as it goes. It is also with a teleconverter. If I hover over it, it kind of pops up. You can see with teleconverter 1.4x. I point this out to point out that Again, technically, Fuji supports in beta. Not all cameras and lenses have had profiles written for them yet. They're doing them as fast as they can. But there are so many, if you will, that we're even seeing support for teleconverters in here. Again, not every lens and camera is supported yet, but a lot of them are. The most popular ones are, and we're getting those teleconverter support in there as well, which is fantastic, right? Because you think about the complexity of it's not just a body and a lens combo, it's now a body and a lens and a teleconverter combo, and we've got support for all three of those pieces all combined here. Anyway, so number one, it simply works, right? Here's a bunch of Fuji photos, beautiful photos from this photographer, Gregory, and we've got these pictures in here. Everything works. Awesome. Let's go back into this and take a look at some of the things that we do have control over here. So here, color rendering. This is where I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. There's under color rendering, there's all these different categories. You have these generic color renderings, right? And this is your kind of, if this is a portrait, your DxO portrait, your natural color, neutral, and so on. All these kind of defaults, camera default, what came out of the camera. Then you've got ones that are specific to a camera body. You have ones that are mimicking color positive film, color negative film, and a bunch of different ones in here. Let's go to this new one called digital films. Now, under digital films, you're going to find a bunch of Fuji films. These are Fuji digital film looks. And this is done because I think it's pretty well accepted in the industry, if you will, that Fuji digital films, their in-camera looks, are some of the best out there. They just look really good. I know a lot of Fuji photographers shoot JPEG because the JPEGs look so good coming out of camera. That's fantastic. Well, now we've got these Fuji digital film looks in here. Now, I do need to tell you that these Fuji, talking specifically about these Fuji digital film looks, they're actually not included in PhotoLab 5. That is part of the FilmPack. So you'll only see those if you also add FilmPack. But once FilmPack is installed, then you see these digital film renderings from Fuji showing up in here as well. So there are a lot of things that get added to PhotoLab once you install FilmPack. Nothing else we've covered today but this is one of those things that will be added only when you add FilmPack. So just want to make sure that you are aware of that. So just so you know. Anyway, so we've got these different Fuji looks in here, and you can see if you're a Fuji shooter, some of these will probably look a bit familiar, have all these lovely, lovely different looks in here. So that's what that is. And then there's the film stocks, right? So if I go over here and this one's set to color positive film, and we look at our color positive film stocks, and there's a bunch of good old Fuji film stocks. So for those of you like me who are around on this planet long enough to have shot Fuji film, like Fuji Velvia, love Velvia, you can add those. But you can add others, right? You don't have to make it look like Fuji, even though just because it was shot on Fuji. I can add it, make it look like it was shot with Kodak film or with the Polaroid film, which also tells us that I can go to a non-Fuji photo and add a color negative look to a color, one digital film look to a non-Fuji photo. You have these options in here, again, when you have the FilmPack installed as well. So really nice stuff in there. So that's basically what I want to show you in Fuji. There's not a whole lot to talk about in there. It works. By all means, if you're a Fuji shooter, download the trial if you don't already have it, see how it renders your Fuji photos, and check that out. Gustavo says, does PhotoLab modify the images or just save the edits the way Lightroom does? Excellent question. PhotoLab is not modifying the images. Every change that you do is just like Lightroom. It is a change to the metadata. It is an instruction telling the software to do this, to raise the exposure, change the highlights, change the saturation, and so on. The original raw file is never changed. Now, if you go to edit that photo in an external application, at that point, it is going to render a TIFF file or JPEG, whatever you like, but TIFF is the right way to go. It is going to render out that TIFF file and then open that in the external app. So that TIFF file will have the permanent changes burned into them, but the raw file is always still there. Even if you're not shooting raw, even if you shot TIFF original, well, I guess you wouldn't shoot TIFF, but if you shot JPEG or you scanned, let's say you scanned photos to TIFF files and you're adjusting those, the changes are never, ever written to the original source file. It is always a metadata, just instruction set, and then only ever written permanently to a separate file. It's literally impossible to overwrite the original file, and that's how that works. So there you go. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, let's move on to PhotoLab because, yeah, we've got 18 minutes left, and move on to FilmPack because we've got 18 minutes left, and FilmPack is the place to go next. All right. I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to fly through the demo that I had done with the with this photo that you might have seen in the video, because this allows me to show you of all the very specific things. But then I'm also going to open, depending on time, this photo here and this one here to have a little bit of a play. Oh, sorry, that's in this photo here reminds me, I wanted to show you timing. So let's go back to PhotoLab for a moment. Timing of DeepPRIME rendering. So this is PhotoLab 4 versus PhotoLab 5 and an M1 Mac. So it's a MacBook Air M1. I mean, they're all the same M1 processors now. This is not the new M1 Pro Max or M1 Pro. This is the original M1 processor versus a Mac Pro. I have an Intel Mac Pro here, my big old machine. So Intel Mac Pro, let's start with that. So Intel chip. DeepPRIME in PhotoLab 4 versus DeepPRIME in PhotoLab 5. 8 seconds to render versus 5 seconds to render. So a 1.6x improvement. If we go to the M1, it used to take, and these are all the same photo, obviously. It used to take 24 seconds to render. Now it takes 9 seconds to render. It's a 2.7x improvement. Now this is one test, one photo. This is not an average of 100 different images. This is one test, one photo. That was the improvement that I measured. So at this point, the M1 is nearly as fast as the Mac Pro. And I'll point out that this is optimized for M1, but it is not yet native M1. Native M1 support will eventually come, and when that happens, I would expect to see even more speed improvements. But with the optimization that's there, this is what we've got. Already almost as fast as a Mac Pro. So this is a $1,000 MacBook Air compared to a $10,000 Mac Pro, and it is only 1 second slower on that export. So pretty impressive speed jump there compared to what it used to be. Obviously, quite a bit slower. Anyway, okay, so there's that. I just wanted to make sure I shared that with you. Okay, moving on. So again, I'm going to start with this photo, run through this kind of known demo, if you will, and then we're going to open the other photos and play with them. So we're going to start with something called Time Machine. Time Machine is this new feature that is just a fun and educational way to explore the different looks that can be added to your photos. And it breaks down these looks by time, by era. And here's how we do this. I'll go ahead and turn off my camera now. Okay, so we enter Time Machine by clicking on this little Time Machine button here. You'll see this column of eras, starting with the 18th century and then into the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, and so on. Each one of these that we click on opens up a sidebar with a variety of different photos, historical photos, that have a description next to them explaining something about the photo and its history. So I open this one up, for example. It talks about exactly what this is. You know, this gentleman, Niepce, may have invented photography, and it talks about the whole original development. There's this whole little bit of history in here, which is really kind of fun and cool. The idea here is that it's a history of photography. Each one of these photos has a little bit of history in here. It's a great way to just learn. It's just fun to learn about photography. So that's what this is here. So this is historical photos with a description of the photo and a little bit of history about it. Underneath that, you'll see this thing that says matching renderings, 1838 Daria, or we look at this one here, matching renderings, 1880 Kimbei. So what this is telling you is the matching rendering of the preset. If you want your photo to look like this, then you find that 1880 Kimbei or 1880 Kimbei 2 to make it look like these photos. Okay, well, let's do that. So I got this photo here, and I'll search down and I scroll through my list here, and we get to somewhere in here. Where are we? Keep going. Probably down near the bottom. There it is, 1880 Kimbei. So I click on that, and it applies that look, and it gives it a similar look to that. So there's two of them in here. Two are very similar, a little bit of contrast difference to the look on here. Now, it's obviously not going to be identical, but it's a very similar color palette. If we look at especially this one here, kind of yellowed background, the faded greens in there, it has a very similar look in here. Now, this is a really cool way to just find these different looks. Let's try a different one. Let's go to like 1940s, and let's see what we got in here. 1940s. Let's go for this one. Okay, so, oh, that's kind of cool, like a very faded, colored film look. Interesting. Okay, so this is match renderings 1940 FP. So we go down, we find 1940 FP. Where's my scroll bar? Here we go. There it is, 1940 FP. Apply that, and there we go. Very similar color renderings across. The idea here again being that if you see a look that you like in a historical photo, you can try and make a match to that using the presets. Let's do one more. 1944 D-Day and 1945 V. All right, so 1944. Scroll down, 44 D-Day, and that would be the V one is the one that I want, the man and woman kissing, And there we go on Times Square. That's epic, famous photo, super famous photo, gosh. And then we see this similar look in there. I mean, it's awesome, right? But here's the thing about doing this. If you are going to apply a historical or vintage look to your photo, the photo needs to represent that look, right? The example that I like to give is if you take a photo of a Tesla and then you apply the look of a daguerreotype to it, nobody's going to believe that you have a daguerreotype of a Tesla. It's just not happen, right? So you want to find a look that matches the photo, a look that is believable for that photo. And for this particular photo, if we look at this photo here, let's take off the effect. We're looking at the original here. You can see that she's wearing this kind of macrame cardigan thing. She's stepping out of a camper van. This is super 1970s-ish. So if I go down here to my 1970s film categories, I've got a bunch of these, and I can just start clicking on these random ones and just see what they look like. Let's see what this one, that looks like a good look. Okay, well, that's black and white. Let's go for this one, an oily one. These are all like a very faded one there. These are all very 70s-ish film looks. Once again, I can go over here and look at the samples. And so this one here, this Concord photo, very specific look to this, not just the faded colors, but see the pinks in the highlights in there. It's even starting to kind of break up. Some of these pink colors are a little bit broken up in here. If we look at this photo, so I've already applied that Concord look to it, that same pink hues, the same kind of broken pink colors in there, it all looks very, very similar there. And this becomes somewhat believable. Now it looks like a photo that could have come from that era. So now the whole thing actually works. You can sell it as an effect that belongs on that photo in there. So that's part of how that works. Now, the other way that we can find photos, find presets rather, is by going to this here, which is it says filter, but this means filter the presets. So we're looking at all presets right now. I can say, just show me my color, or just show me my black and white, or just show me my slide film presets and so on. There's two new categories, cinematic films and digital films. If we go to digital films, you will see all those digital film presets that we saw over in PhotoLab. So the same ones, where's PhotoLab? If we look at the digital films, let me just do a little switcheroo here. We look at the digital film options that we had in here. The same options are here. So we can apply that Fuji Classic Chrome to this, or the Fuji Eterna look. So all of these digital looks are in here. If we go in and let's go look at cinematic films, this is another new preset. Here we see the cinematic one. So if she's wearing like black latex, then we could do this whole moody dark green. It would be very matrix thing. That doesn't work for this photo though, does it? But we go to this photo, the teal and orange one, and this does work, right? This is a look, a kind of modern cinematic look, if you will, that does work for this photo. Now, it's too orange, right? She's too saturated, but it works. This teal and orange works for this. So let's go ahead and modify it. And this is where we get into this little button right here, the modify image settings. That allows me to go in and refine everything that went into this. Now, I'll point out that this is not a LUT. Everything in here can be adjusted by changing all the different presets in here, all the different sliders in here. You can dig into this and figure out where things are. And in this particular photo, most of the look comes from, it wasn't the tone curves, I forgot where it was. Most of the look comes from, yeah, you'd spend your time figuring out where it is. I don't remember. Oh, maybe it's the color channels. I think was it. So some of the color channel changes. I don't remember where it was. That's okay. But you can dig through here and find where the adjustments are. But in this case, I can also just kind of build on top of it. And what I'll do is use the new, under hue, saturation, lightness, the new orange category, and use that to get rid of this orange in here. So we look at the HSL. This is HSL, hue, saturation, lightness. HSL can apply to all channels, right? So I'm changing the hue of all the channels at once in here. Obviously, that's a terrible idea. But I can look at it as individual channels. Now, the name channel is maybe not the best way to think of it, because it's not a channel like a RGB photo has 3 channels, red, green, and blue. Think of it more like a collection. All of the orange colors in your image, all of the cyan colors in your image. And in this case, all the orange colors, I want to back off on this. I want to take the saturation of the oranges down. Not the saturation of the whole thing, just of the oranges. Maybe I'll even darken them just a little. No, that doesn't work. Let's make them light. Let's go ahead and leave them where they were. That was better. So we take that down a little bit. I can look at my blues, or let's go for the cyans. We got this kind of cyan color in there. And let's take the cyan saturation up a bit. Ooh, look at that, popping the saturation. So there you have this really nice, precise control over the individual colors. Very, very easy to get into and adjust. We can also add colors using the split toning. Split toning is often something that's associated with black and white, kind of a duotone type deal. but I can go in here and I can add color into my highlights. Let's add some orange into the highlights and some blue into the shadows, and then adjust those individual colors. So I've brought too much onto the highlights there, so let's back off on the highlight oranges in there. Let me go in and change the shadows. Maybe we want it to be more of kind of a reddish look or a yellow look into the shadows, or something like that. So that works pretty good. And if I come up with a color that I like, I can go in here and save that as a color. I'll go add that, and now I've got my own custom colors in here. So I can go back to a color that I had designed earlier and add that one in. So you really have this refinement over the colors in here. Then if we go down farther here, some other new things, we have these graphical effects where we can add frames, textures, and light leaks. And these on their own aren't new, but there's a bunch of new categories in here. So if I look at something like, let's go really simple, this black and white one. And I don't like this preset for this photo or this frame for this photo, but if I take the size of this, you may have noticed before, if I increase the size, it kind of eats into the photo. We can now flip that around so that we are no longer eating into the photo as we change our frame size, which is pretty awesome. But if I add a frame like classic film, then this one makes sense to have it eating into the photo a little bit, make this really nice and big, maybe randomize, rotate that a little bit rather, get a different angle, and just have this like really cool film edge to this. Then let's add some texture onto the film. Lots and lots of different textures in here. There's tons of them to choose from. Some of them are specific things like this burnt corner, kind of burning out the corner of the image, or some of them are things like this creased paper. You got this like folded up paper look on there. Or let's go for something like concrete, add a concrete texture. We can make that texture really strong, randomize that, maybe make it really light, because let's be honest, texture really needs to be used very subtly to make it look good. And there we go, we come up with that look. Light leaks, I love the light leaks. So we can go into our color light leaks here, choose the angle that it's coming from, randomize the look of that. Let's put this off to the right here. Let's go, or coming off of the, where do we go? Off the right. There we go, randomize that, have this cool look on there. And eventually you come up with a look that you like. And so I go, all right, let's save this as a preset. We're gonna call this live demo preset, There we go. And save that. And now when I go up here to the filter menu, let's clear out the filters and look at just my presets. And there's that preset. So now I can apply that to this photo or to other photos. If I go back to the browse menu, let's not save this, I could actually select multiple photos in here and then process in a batch, take those and apply the preset that I just added. So there's my live demo preset, click process is gonna render those out with all of these images simultaneously with that preset applied in there. Okay, so let me see, I'm gonna come back. There's a couple questions I wanna hit, make sure we get those, and then we will come back and play with the other photos a little bit. Jeffrey says, is it recommended to use FilmPack before or after PhotoLab? Very interesting question, because PhotoLab will process the raw file. It will actually use the same, the profiles, the same camera and lens profiles that PhotoLab does. So you're getting the same level of raw decoding if you go straight into PhotoLab, or if you go straight into FilmPack, or you open it in PhotoLab first. You do have basic adjustments, basic image adjustments in FilmPack. So if I go into, let's open up this photo this time. If I go into this photo, and before, I'm not gonna apply any presets or anything, let's just go over here and scroll down. You'll see that I do have, I can do curve adjustments, right? I can do basic, where are they? Here we go, basic exposure, saturation, changes, and so on, lightness, contrast. I can do all of that in here. But in PhotoLab, I have a lot more control. Of course, I also have all that localized control, which I don't have here. So if your photo is basically fine out of camera, you don't need to do, recover the sky, but leave the rest, or you don't need to do any retouching, is a great example. If you don't need to do any of that stuff, then go straight into FilmPack. If, however, you do need to do a more refined adjustment, a more precise adjustment, cropping, retouching, localized adjustments, do that in PhotoLab first, and then take that image over to FilmPack. And by the time, at that point, when you take it to FilmPack, it's gonna be rendering out as a TIFF, but you will have already done all the things that you would need to do from a raw file, white balance adjustment, highlight recovery, all that. And then FilmPack is just about applying a look to it. And you can do, I'm pretty sure you can do absolutely everything that you can do in FilmPack inside of PhotoLab. Once FilmPack is installed, you have access to it, but the interface is very different in FilmPack. And so, so you have that option, but I think you can do everything in PhotoLab that you can do in FilmPack once you've installed FilmPack. So there we go. Okay. Floyd says, missed it. How did you open FilmPack from within PhotoLab? I didn't. I just launched it as a separate app. But if we go back to PhotoLab, I could take this picture and send this to an application and pick PhotoLab from, well, select the application, send it to PhotoLab. And that's one way to do it. It's not already in this list. Yeah, so that's how you do it. You just go that and open in PhotoLab. So there you go. And oh, that's it. Those are the two questions. Okay, so let's do a little bit of play. We got a few minutes. Let's do a little bit of play. Let me go for, I'm going to use this one here. This I shot this summer. This is in Croatia. And this is one of those walking down this alley. And it was just like, it was kind of a perfect setup. These two older women walking, shuffling down the street. You can see the kind of reflection on the what do you call them? The cobblestones on there. It's not wet, but it kind of has a little bit of a wetness look to it. I shot this in black and white originally, and my camera had it set to black and white. And so I exposed it for that. Looking at it now, it is definitely overexposed as a original file, but you know, we've got basic controls in here. Now, if I take the exposure all the way down, we'll see that I do, well, I guess I do have some, yeah, I guess there is detail in there. Well, okay, cool. So there is detail in there. That's a bit much. Let me see if I can recover some of the darkness in here, some of the midtones before I start applying a look to it. No, so this is actually a great example of a photo where if I really wanted to recover these highlights, I should start in PhotoLab, but we're not going to do that. I'm going to simply go into, what am I looking for? Into the time machine with this and start playing with the different looks. Now here's one where that whole like daguerreotype look would kind of work. I mean, that's like right there. That's a pretty cool look right there. I dig it. I love that photo. I like here this nadir. Where'd it go? I just scrolled past it. I had another one in here I found earlier that I really liked. Oh, here we go. This one with the broken edges. So check out the beat up edges on this photo. Let's close this. We see the whole thing. These kind of beat up edges on the photo there look really, really good for this one. And again, if I want to refine this, I can go in and start refining how this works. I've got this really nice flatness to the photo. Maybe I want to make that a little bit flatter looking. I wonder if I can recover those highlights. I don't know if I can. No, I really can't. I really need to go in there with PhotoLab and recover the highlights in there. Let's do it. Why not? Let's just take an extra minute, bonus time. Let's do a little bit of bonus time. And if you got to go, you got to go. We're hitting the end of the hour, but I just want to play. Let's go for this photo. There it is. There's the original picture. All right, yeah, so we can see in here, we definitely need some recovery in there. So let's do a little bit of local adjustments. I think a control point will do the job in there. I'm going to take that and turn off the masks and just pull the highlight. Actually, we might need to take the whole exposure down and pull highlights down. Let's go highlight recovery. There we go. Let's take the exposure back up. I did a little bit of solarization in there. Highlights down a little bit more. Okay. It's getting there. Let's see, do I want to refine that mask at all? Probably not actually. Oh, there we go. Yeah, let's refine the mask a little bit. There we go. That's better. Tighten that up a little bit. So it's really just hitting those super bright parts of the building. Excellent. That's better. So we definitely have this bit of a solarization happening. I wonder if I take my, let's see here. Let's add a little bit of contrast into that as well. Tones down. I'm trying to get rid of that solarization, but keep my highlights in there. Might need to do a general light. Let's go. Let me turn off the local adjustments momentarily. Let's go back into lighting and see, smart lighting is not going to do it for me. A little highlight recovery in here. Oh, there we go. Well, can we do overall highlight recovery? That actually works better. Pull the midtones down a little bit. There we go. Okay, yeah, you know what? That's great. Do I want to go back to the locals? Actually, yeah, now the locals are adding a little bit more back in. Perfect. Okay, remembering that I'm going black and white, so I'm not worried about the colors being oversaturated. I also want to straighten this, so let's do that. Let's do a little vertical line straightening on here. Could even go into perspective effects, but we're not going to do that. There we go, a little vertical line straightening. Okay, now we're there. All right, now let's take this photo, export to application, and we're going to select an app. We're going to select FilmPack in here. FilmPack. Oh, that's under DxO FilmPack. There it is. TIFF, we're not going to bother being 16-bit because I'm just going black and white and I've already recovered everything. Export that. And I've actually never done this before from this way. Oh, this is the old version. Don't save that one. There she is. All right. And now let's go where, oh, darn it. That was genius. Here we go. Let's go to, it was under Time Machine. It was this one, this Nadir one. There we go. Perfect. Now I want to make those shadows a little bit darker. I want this to be a little bit crunchier, a little bit more silhouette-y. So let's see how do I want to do that. Let's pull the shadows down a little bit more. Or this might be getting overridden by the curves. I may have to do this in curves. Let's go to curves. There we go. Just pull that. Oh yeah, there it is. There's the look I want. Perfect. Digging it. Cool. See? So much fun. That's how I use the two back and forth. And it's perfect. I gotta save that one. Thanks a bunch, everybody. Super fun. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.